Good morning, everyone. I'm Leo Madden. I'm the chair of this Governance Audit and Standards Committee. I'd like to draw your attention to the following. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you sign into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and the camera zooms in to show the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind all attendees to turn their microphones on to speak and then off again once you have finished speaking. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Can we go around for introductions, if we can? I'll do members first, if that's all. Stuart, can I start with you, please?
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Stuart Brown, I represent Fratton Ward, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the committee.
Good morning, Councillor Benedict Swan, Copner and Anchorage Park Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Daniel Weems for Hillsey Ward. I will need to step out at 11 for about 10 minutes, but I'll just rejoin the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Graham Heaney, Labour Council for St Jude Ward.
Thank you all very much. We do have one apology today from Councillor George Madgwick. Yeah, thank you. Can I start with you, Peter, then?
Peter Bell, City Solicitor.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
David White, External Audit Manager from Ernst & Young.
Andrew Britton, External Audit Partner from Ernst & Young.
Elizabeth Goodwin, Chief Internal Auditor.
Paul Somerset, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
Kelly Nash from Strategy Unit.
Ellen Magri, Data Protection Officer.
Richard Locke, Assistant Director for Procurement.
Ian Fitchett, Electoral Services Manager.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Charlotte Smith, Assistant Director of Corporate Services.
Natalie Beckett, Complaints Manager for Social Care.
Christine Thomas, City Help Desk Manager.
Karen Fitzgerald, Complaints Officer.
Richard Webb, Deputy Director of Finance.
Manager.
Thank you all very much for those introductions. We'll now move on to the agenda. Can we do the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of July from page 7 onwards? I shall do them page by page for accuracy and matters arising, okay? And I'll do the big numbers on the page. Oh, have I not done that? Sorry. Any declarations of interest? Yeah, there never is, but you're right, Peter. None. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting of the 19th of July. Page 7. Page 8. There's just one on there, Lizzie, again about home to school transport, but I can pick that up in your report. Okay, thank you. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Are those okay, members? You agree those is a true record? Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item is review of polling districts and polling places. Welcome Ian Fitchett. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this review is being undertaken to make some necessary changes to our polling scheme, which have arisen due to polling station availability issues, namely in Fratton Ward and Copner Ward. As part of the review process, the returning officer is required to be consulted and to make representations, which indeed it did. Within those representations were some proposals for Fratton Ward. Some representations were received in relation to Fratton Ward from Councillor Brown, which made some modifications to the scheme proposed by the returning officer, which have been carried forward into the proposals. Those are shown in Appendix D. Within that Fratton proposal, as well as redrawing the northern part of the ward, the polling districts FA, FB and FC are two redesignated polling places. So that would be FB moving to North End Baptist Church and FC moving to Age UK on Kingston Road. Both of those changes basically are the result of St Wilfrid's Church no longer being available for use. Changes within Copner Ward. The proposals made by returning officer had identified Copner Snooker Club as not an ideal location after all, particularly there were some comments received following the local elections this year. So the proposal from the returning officer was to relocate that polling station to St Albans Church on Copner Road. Councillor Swan suggested that perhaps that wasn't an ideal location due to voters needing to cross Copner Road. Although it had been used in the past, an undertaking was made by myself basically to take another look at the Copner Ward area and the south of the ward, and we identified another polling station option, the Seventh-day Adventist Church on Chichester Road. And so the revised scheme shown in Appendix F was drawn up, and the Copner Ward members consulted and each confirming that they were happy with those revised arrangements. So those are the major changes going forward. As again said in Appendix D and F, the revised schemes for Fratton and Copner Ward.
Thank you, Ian. Members, any comments? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, can we go to the recommendations then, that the changes to the current polling scheme recommended in parish 5.2 to 5.5 are approved and implemented in publication of the 2024 Register of Electors. And secondly, that it is confirmed that the returning officer has delegated authority to make such variations to polling places as may be necessary arising from the availability of premises for use at a particular election. Do you agree, members? Thank you. Oh, Ian, that was... I don't know what you've done, but you've persuaded everybody. Thank you, Ian. Can I apologise for jumping over item 4? It wasn't... I don't know. My eyes are wandering. So item 4 is external audit, a verbal update on the 21-22 audit progress. Can I welcome David White, but especially Andrew Britton. Welcome, Andrew, to your first meeting, I believe, here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with an update on where we are on 21-22, and then Andrew's going to talk about the wider sort of national picture and what's happening with the audit position more widely. So we brought our sort of interim audit results report to a previous meeting of the committee. So we agreed with Chris Ward that it would be useful to give a verbal update on where we now are and where we sort of see the final steps taking place to complete the audit of the 21-22 financial statements, which does remain open at the moment. So by way of a bit of background, there have been some national issues which have impacted most or all local government audits, which have caused the sort of longer period of time to complete the audits than would have been the case in previous years. There are two key ones. One is around the accounting for infrastructure assets as part of property, plant and equipment in the statement of accounts. This one was discussed at some length at a previous meeting of the committee, but just to give a brief sort of recap on that. The accounting requirement is that when you are replacing or adding new assets to the infrastructure, that you should then de-recognise the asset which is being replaced or renewed from the accounts. In practical terms, that's very difficult to do for a lot of councils, including to an extent Portsmouth, because infrastructure assets are often accounted for as one very large item, which is actually comprised of lots of smaller items, and therefore it's difficult to de-recognise only that part of the asset which is being replaced or renewed. The impact of that can be, therefore, that there are figures in the accounts which are materially overstated, the gross cost and the gross accumulated depreciation, even if the replaced item it has no net book value because it's fully depreciated in the accounts. In some cases, the lack of kind of detailed records could also mean that there is an impact on that net book value of the property, plant and equipment as well. The solution that was arrived at for that issue was the introduction of a statutory instrument and temporary changes to the code, whereby there's no requirement in the accounts for this year now to recognise the gross cost and gross accumulated depreciation of infrastructure assets, and there is an implied assumption that anything that's de-recognised is at nil net book value. So those were introduced to overcome the accounting around infrastructure assets in the short term. Portsmouth had actually adopted an approach not dissimilar to that in its draft accounts, almost preempting what that guidance was going to say. And so we are happy with the way that has been done now in the 21-22 statements. But it did take until January of this year for that statutory instrument and the code guidance to be amended. The time then to kind of work through that issue then took us on to a point where another issue came into play, which is around the valuation of the pension fund of which Portsmouth City Council is part. So the Hampshire Pension Fund is subject to a full valuation every 3 years, called a triennial valuation. And then the actuary performs effectively a roll forward from that triennial position for the subsequent 3 years' financial statements. So in the draft accounts for 21-22, the figures that were disclosed for the pension asset and liability were based on a roll forward from the triennial valuation that took place 31st of March 2019. So the 3 years to which that applies are years ended 20, 21 and 22. The triennial valuation process takes about a year to finalise, and so there was another full valuation of the fund at the 31st of March 2022, which then was finalised around the end of March 2023, at which point the infrastructure assets issue was still sort of just finally kind of being resolved and worked through. What that then meant was that that new triennial valuation, because it is effectively valuing the pension asset and liability as at the 31st of March 2022, which is the balance sheet date for this set of accounts, that needed to be considered as a possible adjusting post-balance sheet event for the 21-22 financial statements. So the council obtained a new valuation from the actuary, which showed that there was a significantly material change in the pension liability as at the 31st of March 22. We then needed to do some work at a pension fund level to gain assurance over the new triennial valuation, and the resourcing position meant that work had to take place in July and August of this year. That work is then applicable across all of the member bodies of the Hampshire Pension Fund, so we have then taken that into account for Portsmouth City Council's audit. So that issue is now effectively also worked through and finalised. But as you can hopefully appreciate, those sort of two issues in combination, alongside other factors, have contributed quite significantly to the timings for the 21-22 audit process. In terms of where we are specifically on this audit, as discussed, I think, at a previous meeting, the audit of valuations of property, plant and equipment and investment property has been challenging. For a number of reasons. There's been turnover in the valuations team, which made it challenging for the current members of the valuations team to provide us with the level of audit evidence which we're now required to obtain around these valuations. Members who've been on the committee for some time will be, I think, familiar with this as being an area where shall we say, the bar on the audit side is always being raised. It's a constant area of focus of regulator review when they review audit files. And so it's something where the level of work that's performed to gain sufficient audit assurance over those valuations is substantially more now than it would have been a few years ago. And then there's been the resource issue on our side to the extent that because of the sort of longevity of some of these issues, we've then had to sort of identify the availability of resource to come back onto the audit to then progress the work further as and when things have kind of moved forward sufficiently to allow that to happen. So where we are now is that the substantive work on the audit is pretty much complete. We need to complete our internal review processes on the last elements of those property valuations and the work on pensions, and then our work on going concern and journal entry testing. We will then need to agree the sort of final position of the audit with management, and there will likely be a number of adjustments to the financial statements that we would need to agree with management to ensure they're materially correct. We then review those adjustments and complete the other elements of our concluding procedures on the audit, at which point then we can issue a final version of our audit results report, And we still expect to issue an unqualified audit opinion on the accounts subject to the agreement of those adjustments as may be necessary. In terms of timing, at this point, we would hope to be able to issue that opinion next month, barring any further issues. And we're aware from a previous meeting that there was a delegation in place to the chair and the director of finance to agree any final adjustments and then to sign the final version of the accounts and the letter of representation, which we also issue for you to sign each year. And I think we just wanted to check with the committee that delegation remains valid or whether it needs to be sort of formally renewed through this meeting today. At that point, I'll hand over to Andrew to talk about the wider picture.
Thank you.
So happy to take any questions at that point on 21-22 or move on to the update in terms of the national picture.
Well, if you do your bit, Andrew, and then we'll if members have any questions or comments.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Members may well be aware that back in July, Lee Rowley, the MP and Minister within DLUC, addressed a select committee addressing the issue of the extent of audit backlogs and the number of open audits there were nationally in relation to local government, and issued a statement that gave us direction of travel, the plans for DLUC in combination with the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, who regulate the audit the process, to come up with ways in which we could move forward and reduce that backlog of open audits. There were two objectives that the Minister laid out, which were around maximising assurance for any open audits that are currently still in process or not yet started, and then secondly to move as quickly as possible to the latest financial year, which obviously in this case is 23-24, and the audit of that year for each and every local authority. Members will appreciate that is a somewhat not contradictory but competing set of objectives to provide maximum assurance over open audits and move as quickly as possible to the most recent set. We are very supportive of that as a process, and again, members may be aware that over the summer there has been consultation with on those objectives and how they may be implemented. At this point, we don't have guidance from DLUC or FRC as to how they expect that to roll out across the audit firms. However, we are aware that it will provide the audit firms with options as to how to progress. So either to complete audits that are open, or to be allowed to disclaim opinions and move forward to the most recent year. Until we have the guidance, however, obviously I can't articulate to members how that would impact Portsmouth specifically, but we are obviously, as soon as guidance becomes aware, we will make sure that, first of all, officers and this committee are aware of the impact it may or may not have on the cycle of audits for Portsmouth. You'll appreciate from the audit firm's perspective, it's a question of understanding the volume of work that we're being asked to undertake against a timeline that will be set by the guidance. We expect there to be what's being referred to as backstop dates, i.e. dates by which audits must either be completed or have been disclaimed. We know that those dates, various dates have been proposed, but again, there may be different dates for different years of audit that are open. We're also aware that, for instance, all pension scheme audits will need to be completed because there are bodies outside of the local audit regime which rely on the outcomes of pension scheme audits. And we're also aware that the value for money conclusions that we provide in combination with the financial statement opinions, the value for money conclusions will be required for all years, although there will be the option where there are multiple years open to provide one report covering those multiple years. So, as I said, we're encouraged by the direction of travel. We think this will help bring the audits back up to date, hopefully, and back in terms of what I would call a normal cycle by the 23-24 year end. But obviously, we await the guidance that allows us to do that, and then clearly need to work through the implications for us and for individual audits. Happy to pause at that point, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Any questions of external audit? Councillor Brian, do it.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one with reference to pensions valuations. Is it likely that the triennial revaluation will be an ongoing delaying factor for our accounts in every 3 years? Or is it just that the existing set of accounts have been delayed so much it's allowed the triennial review to catch up and be factored into the 21-22 accounts? And what assurance do we have that future sets of accounts won't suffer the same delays?
Thank you. So no, we wouldn't anticipate this reoccurring. As you rightly sort of say, it is the peculiar circumstances of 21-22 that the process has taken that longer period of time such that that triennial valuation date has then passed and become effectively an adjusting post-balance sheet event for that set of accounts. In the intervening years between triennial valuations, it wouldn't be an issue anyway. But aside from that point, alongside the expectation of the sort of backstop dates for audits up to sort of current year, I think what we're anticipating is that the sort of quid pro quo of getting back on track is that there will be a much closer adherence to deadlines going forwards. And obviously that would be what we would want to do anyway, is to get back to a normal audit process that works to that sort of cycle, so that these factors shouldn't come into play again for the vast majority of authorities at least.
Okay, Stuart, thank you. Any other questions or comments, members? No, okay. Can we then note the report? We look forward to your final version in due course. Thank you very much.
Chair, can you just confirm that the delegation is still in place as David articulated?
As far as I'm aware. James, have you any? Or Peter? I think if that was agreed the last time, we'd have to unagree it, if you want to put it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, can we move on to item 6, Data Security Breaches Report? Helen's here. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular report to Governance and Audit and Standards and covers data breaches reported to the corporate team between the end of February and the end of August 2023. The overall number is consistent with the period compared to last year, slight decrease, just three less breaches recorded. But the trends remain the same. Over half of the number were as a result of emails being sent to the wrong recipient. A lot of those were to internal recipients, actually, so the wrong member of staff. And 85% of those breaches recorded were as a result of human error. Again, that's a consistent trend. None of the breaches in that period were serious enough to be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, and that is a decision reached on the basis of risk to individuals and also the number of people impacted. But none of those in the period reached the threshold for reporting to the Information Commissioner's Office. We have a meeting with our Microsoft partners this time next week to talk about the tools available in the Microsoft suite to help us reduce the number of emails going to the wrong person. So we'll be looking at warning messages that we can ask to be created, generated when particular emails are sent or where there's particular content in an attachment. So we'll be looking at those ways that we can try to reduce the number of emails sent to the wrong person. There was also an increase in the number of breaches where there was a delay in reporting the breach to the corporate team. But we have sent a message, or we've prepared a message to go out via our corporate communications to staff, reminding them of the importance of reporting any sort of breach immediately they identify it. So we're hoping that more will be reported to the corporate team within the 72-hour statutory time frame. Whether anyone has any questions about the report? Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to know whether some of these delays were down to just timing errors. So maybe the issue occurred on a Friday and then wasn't reported over the weekend, or indeed maybe holidays. So I just wanted to know maybe whether in future reports something simple as maybe mentioning that as a reason for a delay could be useful. Just because I know that a lot of the time it is just down to human error in that sense.
Yeah, we would look at that as well. I think a number of them were not reported until they were more fully investigated, maybe. So we're going to be encouraging staff to report it immediately, even if they're not fully averse of what the situation is, because the important thing is if it does reach the threshold for reporting to the Information Commissioner's office, we must do that within 72 hours of identifying the breach. So that's the importance of that 72-hour time frame. But it does include non-working hours, the 72 hours, so it is a challenge. But we are going to be sending out regular communications to remind staff to report them immediately. And we do have a system where if a breach is identified out of hours, it can be reported to our IT service desk, and that's manned almost all the time. So.
And do you envisage some of these reports increasing now that you've obviously pushed some of the communications forward for people to report more frequently? Well, not more frequently, if an issue occurs.
I think people are reporting breaches. I think it's the timeliness of that reporting, so we're hoping that that will improve for sure. But we constantly will be sending out messages. We've got a regular meeting with our colleagues in corporate comms to discuss those sort of most important messages to go out on a regular basis. So we're working with them to make sure staff are fully informed and reminded frequently about what their responsibilities are.
And are you confident that staff are informed, like they are happy with what the processes are?
Yes, I am confident, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Helen, we look forward to the results of your meeting with a wonderful thing, the IT security and architect teams.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I've never heard of them before, but
have you
sure.
not?
No, I'm sure they do a good job. Alan, could I just, I suppose the one that jumped out at me was in relation to the police being notified on one case. I don't think I've come across that before. Is that unusual? And have you any idea what led to, it's quite an action to be taken, isn't it? And yeah. I don't know then if they, sorry, Ella, I'll just finish off. On the same line it says training 1. So is police notified 1, training 1? Is that the same person?
No, it wasn't. No, the police were notified because of a theft of a device. So that was the reason for the police being notified.
Do you know what the result was?
I don't think the device was recovered, but the devices are encrypted. So the theft of a laptop is probably less of a concern than other breaches, in that it would be very unlikely that anyone would be able to access anything on that device. But the theft itself was reported to the police. So. Okay,
thank you, Helen. Any questions or points, members? No, okay. Can we then note the data security breaches report? Thank you. Helen.
Thank you.
So we now move to item 7, overview of Portsmouth City Council complaints, including local government and social care ombudsman complaints 22-23. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting the report today, but my colleagues from corporate complaints and social care complaints are here in case the panel have any, or committee have any specific questions. So this is our annual report on corporate complaints for 22-23, as you just said, including our local government and social care ombudsman complaints. The timing of the report coincides with the annual complaints report from for councils from the LGSCO. which we usually receive in July. So it seems it's a year behind, but it's because that's when we receive our report from them. But we do also report on complaints quarterly to Chief Exec and the Director level within the organisation, and we publish those quarterly reports on our website to ensure we got that timely learning and reporting and transparency around complaints as well. As members, I'm sure, will have read the report, I'll just highlight a few trends. So we had fewer complaints this year than the previous year. That's largely because we had a spike the previous year, which was related to some changes that were made to rubbish and recycling collections, and that largely accounted for that little spike in the number of complaints. Our responses, in line with the timelines in our corporate complaints policy, are now at 79% for stage 1s and 74% for stage 2s, which is, it's improved over time and in line with the changes that we've made to the policy, and we're continuing to work with services to improve that timeliness, and we report on that through our overall performance reporting as well. Important to note that corporate complaints manages the process, but we are dependent on services and directorates to respond to those complaints, so we're not wholly in control of the timeliness of responses. In terms of the trends, a significant proportion of complaints are about the timeliness of the council's response to inquiries from its customers across a whole variety of issues. Because that's coming up as a trend over and again, we're referring this. We've got a cross-directorate customer service leads group, and we're going to take that into the next meeting of that group to have a discussion about what we think might be the causes of that and what we can do collectively to try and address how timely we are in responding to our customers. Just moving on then to the LGO complaints. So slightly more complaints were made to the Ombudsman last year than the previous year, but only 13 decisions were made by the Ombudsman, so that's only one more than the previous year, and only 6 of those complaints were upheld. We compare favourably to comparable local authorities. We only had 46 of our complaints upheld compared to 72% for other comparable authorities. So we think we're performing well in that area around the LGO complaints. We raised a potential risk when we changed our complaint policy from 3 stages to 2, that the 2-stage process may lead to an increase in complaints to the LGO being upheld. We haven't seen that happening, which is good. It suggests that our stage 1 and stage 2 responses are sufficiently robust to be then okay when we send them through, when they go to the LGO, but we'll continue to monitor that. The 6 upheld complaints, there were 3 for social care, 2 for special educational needs, and 1 for planning, and they were all complex cases in complex areas. Remedies were made in all cases, and we've included the remedies and the additional learning that was applied by the relevant services in the report. So just in summary, overall complaint performance we think remains good, and there are no issues of concern either across our corporate or LGO complaints, but we're continuing to work with services, directors, managers to make continuous improvements to how we manage complaints, so that we give a better customer experience and also that the organisation learns. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlotte. Could I just ask, I don't know if it was this time last year when we decided to reduce the stages from 3 to 2, or the year before, but it was some stage, right? Has that made any real difference, particularly in the time taken?
It's making a significant difference to the ability of the organisation to manage complaint responses, because the LGO gives a recommended time frame to see the complaint through the entire process, whether you have 3 stages or 2, which meant that we could give slightly longer for stage 1s and slightly longer for stage 2s. And what we found is that enables us to have more robust complaint responses at stage 1, which means we need to take fewer complaints through to stage 2, which is a good thing. It's a good thing for the organisation in terms of the amount of work. It's a good thing for the customer because their complaint is fully resolved. And if they wish to go to the Ombudsman, then they can do that without delays in that process. So from our perspective, the 2-stage process is working well.
Good, thank you. Any questions or comment, member? Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted some clarification about paragraph 9.3 because I was a little bit confused about what was being referred to here. It talks about the local government and social care ombudsman complaints, and the figures in the table below refer to the procedure upheld cases where satisfactory remedy implemented before the complaint reached the LGSCO. And we have nil, but other authorities have a percentage, varying as it says there. So does that refer to the number of complaints that were eventually upheld or the number of complaints that were investigated? Because I was assuming that at some point maybe we let the Ombudsman deal with it because we've gone as far as we can. So are we expected to continue trying to resolve it while the Ombudsman is still, or while it's still getting to them? I was a bit confused about it. I didn't really understand what that was and why we are where we are.
So the data around the number of complaints where we have a remedy in place before the Ombudsman makes a decision, in all of our 6 upheld cases, the council hadn't offered a remedy in advance of the Ombudsman telling us to do that. That's largely because I think the services who had responded to those complaints at stage 2 felt that they had done everything that they needed to do in relation to that customer and that issue, and the Ombudsman didn't agree. And that's the reason why the data is as it is. I think in looking at that again, what we encourage the service areas to do is to have another look again, because they applied the remedies once they've been told to do so, and say, actually, what are your additional learnings around this, and how do we move forwards in a way that we don't make these same mistakes again? But I think there is definitely a tendency sometimes to be quite robust in our defence of our own actions, and I think that that's the role of the Ombudsman to basically to review impartially and to instruct the council to reflect and take another look.
With a quick supplementary, I mean, none of them this year. I mean, was it different in previous years? Well, we haven't got any to compare. I mean, did we do better in that respect in the previous years, or not? Or is there no information on that?
I actually don't know the answer to that in terms of the data from previous years. I can take that away and have a look.
Okay, members, thank you. Any other questions or points?
Yeah, that's okay, that's fine.
No, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Members, can we note this report? Okay, thank you very much. Can we move on to item 8, unreasonable customer behaviour policy? Is your good self again, Charlotte?
Yep, that one's me again. So we're bringing this one to the Committee for Information because it quite closely relates to an element of the corporate complaints policy, which has a section in it which sets out how we will respond if the behaviour of a customer towards us in our management of their complaint is becoming, we consider to be unreasonable and therefore impeding our ability to investigate their complaint, but also impeding our ability to deal with complaints from other customers because it's taking a disproportionate amount of time. What we found is that we have this approach set out in our complaints policy, but we don't have this approach set out for our general customer interactions. And directorates were coming to us and saying, can we use the complaint policy to help us to manage a situation with a customer that's become difficult, but they don't actually have an active complaint. So we've had to say, no, we can't use the complaint policy for that. And it's highlighted that there is a gap in the approaches that we take. So we developed a new policy in consultation with the cross-directorate customer services leads group, which I mentioned as part of the previous item, so that all directorates have had an opportunity to input and make sure that this will work for them. And the idea is that it will enable the council to transparently manage situations where the behaviour of a customer has become, in our view, unreasonable. And that's unreasonable because it's either a large volume of contact in a short space of time, which takes council officers away from being able to deal with other things, as well as making it difficult to respond to the customer, or because the nature of the communication can become at worst, kind of aggressive and abusive. one of the examples that we used in the report, we have a customer who sent 58 emails to the council in less than a month, all about similar or related subjects, sent to different officers, different email addresses, and then it takes a huge amount of time to unravel, making it difficult for us to respond to the customer, but also difficult for us to manage in terms of capacity. We have, as I said, a section on managing unreasonable customer behaviour and complaints. And so we've tried to replicate the principles around that in the approach that we take in the policy that we've set out. We've used the definition of unreasonable customer behaviour reflects the local government social care ombudsman's best practice around that. And the idea is that we set out an approach that attempts to deal with the issue initially informally, and we've got some guidance for managers around how to do that and how to support that informal resolution. And a lot of that is about encouraging services to, take a step back, look at what we've already done, to try and see the situation from the customer's point of view, and to make sure that we've done everything that we possibly can to respond to that customer's concerns. If that's not successful, then the policy then allows for a referral to the City Help Desk manager, who will then provide an impartial review to make sure all the possible steps have been taken in relation to that customer, and where necessary to advocate for the customer in relation to that interaction with the directorate or service involved, because sometimes if you've been dealing with a customer for a long time, you need having somebody who can take a step back and give an impartial review is helpful. And the City Help Desk manager will then, in communication with the customer, impose restrictions if they're needed. And those restrictions can be things like providing the customer with a single point of contact so that all of their communication comes through one place, avoiding scattergunning across the organisation, or doing things like saying, okay, so you send us lots of emails, we will read those emails at a designated point and we will provide you with one response rather than 58 responses, so that it's not about not responding, it's just about managing the communication and managing the contact. And hopefully the outcome of that is that that customer will ultimately get a better service, although they may not like having their communication with us controlled in that way. The policy also allows makes provision for the customer to appeal and to request a review of those restrictions if they are put in place. I should say, though, council staff are experts at handling customer interactions and manage many thousands of interactions with customers where they're unhappy through to a successful resolution. So we're not envisaging that this will need to be used often. We'd expect it to be extremely rare. But in those situations where the interaction with the customer becomes such a significant issue, it will provide us with a transparent approach, which is transparent for the customer and is nice and clear for staff so that they know what to do, and we're handling all of these things consistently. I hope that's helpful, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Did you say that this was just for information, this report?
Yes, we brought it for information because it links to the corporate complaints policy.
So there's no point in us saying anything?
If the committee have comments, we're more than happy to take those on board, and we haven't implemented the policy yet, so we can make amends to it. Be very interested in your views.
Just want to get it right. I don't want to waste your time or our time. There's just a little typo in 4.2. Okay, just to, sorry I picked these things up. Appropriate manager to contact the customer rather than the council. That would be good, going round in circles, wouldn't it, Charlotte? Charlotte, could I just ask, is this a bit over the top? Is this sledgehammer to crack a nut?
No, it's not over the top. As I said, we would envisage that we would only need to use it rarely, but we do have examples from across the organisation of customers who, for a variety of reasons, and we've referenced the need to consider our equality duty and the need to make reasonable adjustments for customers as well within the context of the policy. But we do have a very small minority of customers who bombard the organisation with contact to the extent that it makes it very difficult for officers to carry out the rest of their role, because they can spend literally days a week dealing with one customer, and we simply don't have the resources to do that. But also, if we don't marshal the way that that contact comes in, it's very difficult for us to resolve those issues for the customer as well, and that's equally as important.
Okay, so we haven't got any statistics. I mean, what numbers of people are we talking about currently then who would be seen to need to be contacted in relation to the emails and whatnot to send?
So we don't have any statistics to offer you because this isn't something that the organisation so far has been collecting data around, but we've been approached by directorates on a number of occasions and by cabinet members for those for those areas to say this persistent contact is an issue and we need to have an approach to manage it. We don't have someone waiting in the wings for us to apply the policy to at the moment, but we do have customers whose contact with us is at a level where we would envisage we might need to do something like this in the future. We have a customer at the moment through corporate complaints who actually has a complaint that we have restricted contact around because of the volume of contact that we've received. So it is a real issue for us. We wouldn't have spent the time putting this together and bringing it here if it wasn't an issue that is absorbing staff time that we simply don't have, and that would therefore have a detrimental effect on our other customers.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, we have a duty to our staff as well as to the customer. But if we didn't have this policy in place, how do we deal with such customers at the minute then? We just go on, do we? Or do we try some intervention?
Currently, we try and resolve situations with customers informally, but we don't have any clear process for the organisation to follow to actually formally impose restrictions. And if we don't have something to follow, then we are in danger of everybody doing things in a different way and it not being clear for the customer what we're doing and not being clear for the staff or the manager involved as to what they need to do to impose something like this fairly. Because if you restrict contact without doing it in line with some sort of clear process, you're in danger of making it difficult for that customer to access services from us when they actually need to, and we need to guard against that. So it's kind of making sure that we're putting the right structure in place so that our customers can continue to contact us and that necessary contact doesn't get lost in unmarshalled volumes of emails or phone calls or whatever their chosen method of communication is.
Okay. Members, any questions or points? Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you clarified that we don't really have a policy beforehand, and I fully understand why you need to do that. I mean, I'm aware of a couple of examples where I think this might apply. Can I ask a couple of questions about how we will deal with this? Because clearly sometimes individuals will have a genuine complaint that is within a whole series of other complaints which turn out to be not relevant or not genuine. So we always have to be aware that there could be something within a tranche of correspondence or a tranche of complaints which is genuine, but a lot is not. How do we go? Is this about referring it further up the chain for decisions on that, or are managers confident that they feel able to deal with those? Do we have enough communication? Because the other concern, I suppose, is that someone might, as you quite rightly said, bombard different departments with complaints, and then do we actually realise, or do people who are receiving it realise that other people are getting the similar sort of complaints or different complaints that are related to the same thing?
So there's a couple of bits to that. So the genuine complaint or the genuine concern, that's exactly why we need to have these things in place, because the danger if we don't is that, and one of the things that we are absolutely clear about within our corporate complaints policy as well, is that just because the customer deals with us in a way that we may consider to be unreasonable, there are still genuine complaints in there, And I'll refer across again to the equality duty, and sometimes our customers deal with us in a way that we may consider to be unreasonable because they have a wide range of issues. But their complaints, there are still genuine complaints in there, and it's an absolute priority for us to extract those genuine complaints and to make sure that they're dealt with. But in order to do that, sometimes that means we need to put in measures in place to manage the way that they communicate with us in order that we can deal with their issues and complaints. And, you know, and then to take the example of somebody who contacts multiple council departments, the approach that we take around that in terms of applying some kind of restrictions in terms of unreasonable customer behaviour would be to give that person a single point of contact. So we'd identify within the organisation who is the most appropriate service person to take the contact from that customer, and then to essentially facilitate responses to that customer, because actually that would be quicker than that customer emailing 20 different council officers with the same or very slightly different variations on the same questions, and then all of those officers trying to respond to them individually, and then not having that joined up response to the customer where we are where we're actually being consistent about what we're saying. So in theory, the idea is that it improves. I know the customer won't necessarily feel that this is the case, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that we can respond to genuine concerns and that they don't get lost in multiple emails to multiple different areas.
I'll come back with a couple of things. I mean, I do think it's a minority problem, but it is potentially quite a serious problem for those who are on the receiving end, officers as well, who can find it quite difficult to deal with. I wanted to ask two other questions, really. If a member of the public feels that they are on the receiving end of somebody making complaints about them, how would they deal with that? Could they come to the council and say, I'm getting the council asking me about lots of things, and I think someone is, you know, using this to have a go at me or whatever, you know, and feels they're being. Does a member of the public or Parliament who runs a business, would they be able to come to the council and say, I have concerns about what's going on? Obviously, they won't know who is complaining because we don't tell people. But is there any avenue for someone who feels they might be the victim of that sort of thing, being able to come to the council and at least discuss it or maybe have it investigated?
If I understand correctly, so if a member of the public feels that the council is contacting them repeatedly about issues, and those are coming from different departments or anything like that, if got any concerns about any conduct by the council whatsoever, then they can make a corporate complaint, and then that will be logged, allocated and robustly investigated. So yes, absolutely, the corporate complaints process is the route for a customer in that situation.
My final question is, I mean, it hasn't happened to me, but it may happen if a member is getting someone who's constantly throwing stuff at you about a complaint. They may not be satisfied, you're responding to it, and they keep coming back and coming back. Can members refer that and as a way of trying to deal with it, or do we have to deal with it ourselves as best we can?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can take that away and have some discussion with our monitoring officer to see whether or not that's something which could be incorporated, or whether we would need to take a different approach. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, but we can take that away and have some discussion about what the approach would be, because I can appreciate that that may be an issue for councillors as well.
Thank you, Graham. Any other points, questions, members? No. There is no recommendation actually with this report, so I don't know whether it's not even to note. It's not your fault, it's just that you did come. That's what threw me with your information only. No, it's fine, but can we note this report, members? Is it? What page is that? Oh, I have 77, sorry, what? What's I haven't got, what is it?
That the Governance and Audit Standards Committee notes the report.
Oh, it's just a note. Sorry, thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I missed that. Well, note the report then, members. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thank you, Ralph, for coming. We now move on to modern slavery. Natasha Edmonds, the Director of Corporate Services here. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is related to our modern slavery statement, section 10 of which has an improvement plan. And the purpose of this report is to provide a progress update on that plan. The plan covers a variety of different areas around strategic leadership, partnership working, awareness raising, which also incorporates training and development, some of the activities around our policies and processes and our procurement activities as well. In summary, we're making good progress in the plan. We've also conducted a self-assessment of our progress, and that also has given us a good score in terms of the scoring of advancing. So we will continue to meet as a partnership group, which involves not just the council, but also partners from the police, Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and colleagues from within council services. We will be continuing to monitor the plan and bring updates to this committee over the course of the year. I'm assuming you've all read the report, so we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, members? No? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that, Natasha. Members are happy to note the report? Thank you. Agreed. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you. Can we move on to item 10, Corporate Performance Report, Quarter 1 to 2023-24. Natasha Nash, our Corporate Performance Manager. Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual quarterly report that comes to the committee. We've recast it slightly to follow the corporate priorities, now that we've established the process of creating the corporate plan each year to set out those priorities, which obviously we had a break in the process during the time of the pandemic. What we've tried to do is present for you kind of the business as usual activity indicators in graphic form to make them as easy to interpret as possible, and then also provide reports on those transformational projects that will help move us towards those priorities, as well as a bit of a narrative summary at the beginning around those key areas of activity. What you'll also see is a report around the general corporate health of the organisation to give you a sense of how we're doing in broader terms. In section 4 of the covering report, we pick up some of those key themes emerging. As you would expect, we're seeing some significant pressures in those demand-led services, particularly around adults and children. And we are seeing some significant pressures which are generated by the challenges we have in recruiting and retention of staff at the moment, and that's for a variety of reasons. I would emphasise that this is a quarter 1 report, so as we tend to find over the course of the year, these reports develop as more information becomes available, or people bring in indicators that are probably not available at the beginning of the year, but actually develop the picture as we go along. So we're not suggesting for any means this is a static set of indicators. It's a starting position. I would expect that to develop throughout the year. So yeah, happy to take any questions. As is always the case, I can't necessarily comment in detail on any of the particular operational points, but very happy to report those back and very happy to report in more general terms around the sort of process of the performance report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members, any comments or points, questions? Councillor Heaney, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question on page 135 in reference to the item on school play streets. It talks about school streets. It says 80,000 measures, no allocated revenue budget for play streets. It talks about the pilots. Now, it says ongoing dependence on resources. I mean, a lot of publicity was done at the time, well, in advance of these being rolled out. In fact, I collected some of the publicity, an article in the Sun newspaper, etc., etc. I know COVID delayed the implementation of these, and we have some, obviously, pilots that were tried out. But what concerns me is that once we've started to do this, you raise expectations, and then other schools may well say, oh, we'd like to do this, and then we say, oh, we haven't got any money for doing it. So I'm wondering around the planning of, initiatives like this, whether we need to think more carefully about how we plan and publicise initiatives, because publicising them is all very well, but you haven't got the money to do them. You look a bit stupid when people say, well, what are you going to do? And, you know, I think there has been some disappointment that the school play streets hasn't really taken off, partly because there don't appear to be any resources for it.
Yeah, happy to respond to that, Chair. So I think the points you raise are absolutely valid ones that I know the teams have been particularly concerned about. And I think some of the issues in terms of turning the trials into reality some have been about physical measures that need to be put in place. Some have been around the sustainability of the volunteer involvement and what have you around those as well. So I think they all have slightly different issues that make them kind of sustainable or not. I'm really happy to ask colleagues in Transport just to give you a bit of a status update on each of those and sort of what the particular challenges or barriers might be, just to crystallise those. But it's certainly a difficult one, and then I think the trials have been very useful in sort of flushing out what might work and might not work in those individual settings, because they are all very different in terms of the types of solutions that need to be implemented, but very happy to get a more detailed report on that.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Could I just ask, on challenges and risks on page 112, and I know this is information that's been given to you, but just something jumped out at me, perhaps with my previous social care hat on, but, and I don't know what power we have as a committee to instruct anything to happen, but if you look at the adult social care, about the second paragraph down, and it says that the ICB, the Commissioning Board, has taken decision not to fund a nurse resource, spelled the wrong way, for the MASH, and then gives the implications of it. Why? I don't understand why a decision that which then passes work on to other people actually was taken by them. I mean, is there more information on that?
Yeah, we can certainly bring additional reports to you. This has been considered by colleagues in the partnership space working with the ICB, and there is also a paper due to come to the Health and Wellbeing Board on Wednesday the 27th, so next week, which considers some of the safeguarding board issues that we have as well. So there's definitely been covered, and very happy to bring back a more detailed report about that, and just setting out what levers the local authority does have to play into that space.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not on HOSP. You are, Graham, are you? Yeah. Country in.
Can I come back on a second question? It's more about the sort of format and style of the report. I have a paper copy in front of me, and it's all grayscale, and I can't work out what the reg rating against trend means. It's dark grey or light grey, and I have no idea. And there's also things like Portsmouth and Target, and sometimes I can't see Target, and I'm not sure what Portsmouth is. So actually, it's quite difficult to really work out what we're looking at. Could we think about how we maybe improve that?
I totally take that. I actually didn't realise myself until I saw it in paper, because I'd obviously been looking onto the laptop, so that was something I hadn't quite realised until I saw that here, and absolutely I'll take that. Well, I know, I'm really sorry, and what I'll do is put the words over the boxes to make it really clear in the printed version. Look at the colour contrast of the graphs, which again look beautiful on the laptop, not so much here, and I absolutely take that. And the other thing that I did notice, I'll probably number them as well to make it easier to reference, because again, when you see it in this format, it is more difficult. So absolutely take those points, and I do apologise.
I probably could have gone and looked at the online version and compared it with the paper version, but I'm a bit of an old-fashioned character, and I tend to scribble notes on things when I want to know, so I don't forget what I'm going to ask about, and also know where my place is. So I normally do it on the paper version, so that's the problem I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Can we note the report and note that Helen's going to come back on the point that I raised? Helen, God, Kelly. Is that okay, members? Thank you very much. Thank you. Can we now move on to item 11, Internal Audit Performance Status Report to the 8th of September 2023. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Chair. Standard report is presented and is in front of you, and it narrates any work that we've completed since the last reporting period. You will see, if I take you through a number of the pages, so 151, you will see that we are on target to complete the work included within the plan between now and the end of the financial year. Page 152 includes any ongoing audit involvement, including the number of investigative items of work, and 153 includes any movement within the plan, those that have been removed temporarily for consideration for the next year's plan, and those that have been added. I did want to draw your attention to, at the bottom of one of the removals is gas services for a follow-up. The removal is because the implementation date, which is attributed to a contract, is not due until 2024. Moving on to pages 156 onwards, this is where we have the detail in relation to audits that we have completed. Apologies, because there's a little bit of a typo at the top. It should state 23-24, not 24-24. Chair, at the last meeting, we had brought to your attention the follow-up item of work on home-to-school transport. I wasn't going to go into any other detail because I gave a briefing at the meeting. It now sits at reasonable assurance, and we gave you our assurances that Audit would audit it on a yearly basis until it remained stable. Happy to take any questions you may have on any particular area that we have audited, be it that it is grant related, full audit related, or follow-up work, which are on the which is in the tail end of the report from 161 onwards. Chair, beyond that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. This noise is doing my head in. I'm just looking at the high risks, you know, and if you paragraph 8 there, and there's a couple in adult social care. Now, these are fairly serious ones, aren't they? Where procedures around frequency of home care visits are recorded. And but I suppose the question is, has this been going on for years, or is this just something that's recently happened and just fallen through the chair, if you like?
Apologies, Chair, because I'm struggling to hear you, but is this in relation to 156, the quality assurance?
That's it.
Yeah, wonderful. We have not audited the quality assurance side of the equation for a number of years, so being able to accurately answer whether there is any historic trends is a little difficult.
Okay, no, it's just...
However, my colleague has just scribbled a little note regarding the pandemic. Would you like to share a little bit more detail?
Yes, so around the frequency of their care home visits, the pandemic obviously did cause an issue with the amount that then got delayed, and kind of since then they were in the stage of catching up. But what the point we're making is they don't really have any formal procedures about how they're going to do it and the frequency. So in answer to your initial question, I think the pandemic caused a lot of these issues that they're still kind of catching up on, but there is still some need to have formal procedures about how often they plan to do these in the future.
I think that was very good, Paul, but I still think if you made an arrangement with a carer, there should be something in writing, you know, so that we know what the carer is doing, and that still could have happened during COVID, couldn't it?
Yeah, potentially, just to emphasise what Lizzie said, we didn't have visibility of this before this audit, so that was some of the narrative that we received during the audit, but before that we couldn't say.
Well, I find it concerning, that's all myself. I don't know if you could pass that message on when you're telling people. Could there's some other ones out there, but I'm not there doing that bit. We could... The 9, page 161. The DDPR, right? At the time of follow-up discussion, senior management confirmed the actions had not progressed, and therefore all exceptions remain open. Again, you know, we do get this on not a regular basis, some basis. Why haven't they progressed?
Chair, the Directorate would probably be best placed to answer that. However, WhatsApp usage is was very new within the organisation, and the onset of the pandemic. WhatsApp should not really be used by us as an organisation because of who actually hosts WhatsApp and because it doesn't comply. We tested Children's Services because Children's Services were probably the forerunners to begin with on the outset of the pandemic, who needed to use this. They have, in retrospect, gone back to perhaps make certain that there are gaps in the procedure, which was initially formalised but difficult to enact because of the nature of the interactions between themselves and the young individuals. So they've made some progress with realigning to ensure that we're complying from a framework perspective, but we're not going to comply from a legislative perspective because of the nature of how WhatsApp is deployed.
Okay, thank you. And could I just, I know you've mentioned 163 home to school, and of course you're auditing rather than making decisions on it, but we still need to ensure that people accompanying our children to school and back do have the proper qualifications to do so. Yeah? And that's not happening, is it?
It is significantly better. There is recognition that of the cohort of individuals that we use at any one stage, that there will be a number that come up for renewal. So there will always be some that are on the cusp. This is significantly better. So those where there are gaps, they are smaller than we have ever seen during previous audit periods.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions or points? No, thank you. Could we then note the audit performance for 23-24 to the 8th of September this year, and secondly, the highlighted areas of concern in relation to audits completed for the 23-24 audit plan, including follow-up work performed. And agreed, members? Thank you very much. Thank you. We now come on to item 12, Treasury Management Outturn Report 22-23. Richard Webb's here, and you've been here before, Richard, but can I welcome Helen Clem, who's the Technical and Financial Planning Manager. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Treasury Management Outturn Report for the financial year 22-23, which ended on the 31st of March 23. So this report comes to this committee for scrutiny and will then go on to Cabinet and full Council. During 22-23, oh sorry, is that better? Okay, so during 22-23 the Council undertook no new borrowing. Our gross balance of borrowing as at the 31st of March was 747 million. Our gross investments at the same period was 404 million. Overall, the net treasury costs were 356,000 under budget for the year, and this is due to the returns on our investments being higher than expected because of the increase in interest rates. And as a continuation from the previous year, the the Council has sufficient liquidity to meet our obligations as they arise. We're happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Any questions or comments? No? 1-0 to you, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we, members, then, can we note the report? Is that agreed? Thank you. And then the item 13, the Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the first quarter 22-23. I think it's yourself again, Helen, is it?
It is, thank you. So this is, as the Chair has said, Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the end of the first quarter, the 30th of June. So this report just comes to this committee for scrutiny. We continue to operate within our authorised limits and indicators that were approved by Council in March 23. Again, during the first quarter, the Council hasn't undertaken any new borrowing. Our gross borrowing at that time was 743 million, and the value of our investments as at the end of quarter one is 390 million. We have sufficient levels of investment at this time to meet our ongoing liquidity requirements. Again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, any? Councillor Brown, Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. Sort of half comment, half question. Obviously, we've seen in the news recently quite the high-profile case of Birmingham City Council putting in a Section 114 notice. I think from the several years I've been on gas, at least, it's been quite obvious that Portsmouth has a much more stable financial situation. Could you just give us some reassurance that we're not, blindly, heading towards a Section 114 without realising it, or that we are fairly certain that the controls and measures we have in place mean that we are going to be stable and not on the verge of bankruptcy and subject to a news story coming up soon?
Absolutely.
I'll take this one. Thank you for that question. As you can see from these reports, we've operated within the parameters set out in the Treasury Management Strategy, which was approved by Council. We have a strong focus on security, liquidity before yield. So I can assure you that we have good governance arrangements in place, and any breaches of the Treasury Management Strategy would be reported here to you.
Okay, Stuart. Councillor Heaney, Graham?
Can I ask this, what might seem slightly frivolous, but what are vanilla interest-bearing deposits? I know I've got a sense of what externally managed funds are and tradable structured interest-bearing deposits, but what are vanilla interest-bearing deposits? It's the bottom of page 18. I can't see the number because it's been...
Yeah, those deposits...
183.
I can see, on the report. Those deposits where we are placing on deposit with banks or other local authorities, and we have a fixed interest rate on those returns. And the majority of those are invested within a year.
And they are described as vanilla rather than bank interest deposit rates.
Okay. Okay, members. Thank you. So can I recommend that the Council's Treasury Management activities have remained within the Treasury Management Policy 23-24 in the period up to 30th of June 23, and secondly, the actual Treasury Management indicators as of 30th June 23 as set out in Appendix A be noted. Is that agreed, members? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move on to item 14, which is the exclusion of the press, because we do have some confidential report papers within this report. So I have to move the exclusion of the press and public at this stage. If we need to go into the exempt report, then we'd have to do that in a private session. Is that correct? Sorry, are members happy with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, Richard. Well, we do have a lot in the public arena, Richard, which we have here on white paper. So could I pass over to you, Richard? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll run through the report fairly quickly. There's a few things that we've changed since last time. So the spend compliance is now across a full quarter. What we're going to be doing is reporting on regular quarters throughout the year as well, so we can give more consistent sort of position on performance and comparison. Starting with the spend compliance, our systems that we have in place through Oracle Fusion are still very strong. We're at 99% compliance in terms of spend being be able to be tracked back to a contract entry on our Intend system. Work is ongoing on those other systems where the spend doesn't go fully through Fusion, such as Mosaic, Controc, Systems Link, Scala. We've had some progress since the last committee report, but that work is ongoing. We're mostly focusing into Controc at the moment. Systems Link, where we process most of the utilities payments, I know with certainty that those contracts are compliant. We have let them through lawful routes. We just need to get contract entries up on the system. In terms of the next part of the report, which is in relation to waivers, a little bit of development on that report, where we are now also reporting on cumulative waivers, where the actual waiver value that was signed off in the quarter might not be above £100,000, but there might be successive waivers that would bring it above that. So trying to give you a bit more transparency there. In terms of waivers, again, no high-risk waivers. We're not really in the business of signing off contracts that would put the authority at a level of high risk. A number of medium-risk contracts where there is a breach, but there is clear mitigation in place. We're working to bring those contracts into compliance, and we think there is limited to nil risk of market challenge. One extra medium risk waiver compared to last time. We took a report, same number as low risk waivers. In terms of the waivers where it's the cumulative spend, so not the actual value of the waiver in the quarter above 100k, but when you add up cumulative waivers, a number of those, one which we would class as medium risk, which is just tipping above a statutory threshold, and the other four there all as low risk. In terms of the last part of the report, which is the one that's had the most work undertaken on, since the last committee meeting we have now disbanded the old key performance indicator monitoring system we had on Intend, which I think wasn't fit for purpose anymore and wasn't being consistently applied. We've now started to roll out the revised flexible, simpler model. We're piloting that, so we've only put it on 72 contracts because we didn't want to put it on lots and lots of contracts, run the first report and find that those teething problems were across a significant number of contracts. What we've done though is we've focused our attention onto the biggest contracts in terms of spend. So whilst the number is low, the value of contracts is significant. So for the 14 contracts that we're reporting on in this quarter represent over 40% of our lifetime spend on the Intend register. 100% of those contracts that were due to be reported on have been reported on, which is a massive improvement compared to before. I think we're at 23%. So we're actually making sure that when we're rolling this out, people understand what it's for, they know how to complete it, and we're supporting them through the training. Performance-wise, none of those contracts showing as it means we'd be immediately terminating or moving towards termination. A number that there is some room for improvement on, but nothing that we would be moving towards termination on. But the majority, certainly in terms of spend, are all performing very well, either exactly as per the contract requires, or in some instances going above and beyond in terms of providing added value to the authority. So that's a summary of the report. Happy to answer anything that's on the white paper now, if there's any questions from the committee.
Okay, we're going to just like to say, Richard, that the improvements you put in appear to be working, and we're getting much more compliant, so well done to that. Could I just, there's one, it's on page 195, and it's in relation to the International Port Finance System. And I know it's a small paragraph, and the risk is low, but £100,000 can't be found. It's 100k, which is a lot of money to me, Richard. It mightn't be much within the contract itself, but since these are online transactions, aren't they? How can that happen?
In relation to that particular entry, that was a contract that I was actually directly involved in tendering, so I can provide assurance that it has been lawfully procured. On Scala, they don't have a system in place where if you seek to raise a purchase order, there's no prompting or blocking to say, is there actually a corresponding contract entry? So on Oracle Fusion, where we have that forces people to put the contract entries up on the system, which means that we're in full compliance with transparency code. On Scala, that's not there. It's more of a manual intervention. So So yeah, so we haven't lost the spend. It's just that we haven't got the contract entry up on the system, which we now work to
Well,
get
no, I see
corrected.
it's going to be rectified, and that brings their compliance
Yeah.
up to 98.6.
Yeah.
Well done on that. Anyway, Councillor Bryan, Stuart.
Thanks, Richard. Just a very quick question on the KPIs on pages 198, 199. Obviously, on the two different tables there, the percentage columns add up to significantly more than 100%. Could I just, for my own clarity, get a little explanation of what those percentages refer to?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry, you've got a percentage which is based upon numbers. So, for instance, the 6 and the 8. The 6 is 42.86% of 14, and 8 is 57.14%. The spend is the same aspect there. So the 113 million is 9.31%. The over 1 billion is 90.36% of the spend. Yeah. Apologies. I'll present that better in the next report.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heaney-Graham.
Yeah, I'll admit I struggled a bit with this report, but maybe because I was reading it late at night after a day at work. But I had a couple of questions, really. There's a reference on page 192 to the fact that 2.25 million was coded to corporate services as spend, but doesn't appear to have been spent by them. And I'm really rather puzzled as to how such a large amount of money can somehow be misallocated to a whole sort of section of the council, and I wondered if you could explain why that happened.
I'll struggle to explain why it happens. I don't work in finance and I don't raise those. And I'm not saying for definite that it's incorrect. It just looks a bit peculiar when you consider the transactions that are there that I think probably relate to regeneration schemes. So what we can do, following on from committee today, is I can engage in with finance, raise it to their attention, and there might be some corrective action that needs to be undertaken. It might just be potentially my own naivety when it comes into the complexities of the finance systems. It might be that spend has correctly been attributed, but it does look a little bit peculiar. So I was just raising that to the attention of the committee.
The second question was around this issue of the way the finance system, you're talking about Oracle Fusion in the table on page 191 and then the following pages. And it talks about compliant and non-compliant. I'm not sure are you saying that it's not recorded on the system properly? Because when we say 98% compliant, it sounds really good. But if you look at the figure around adult services, of which we have a real problem in managing and controlling the budget, there's £9.25 million worth of money that apparently is non-compliant. Slightly worries me.
Yeah, the compliance definition is stated a bit earlier in the report. The report is quite long, and if you're reading it late, there's quite a bit of detail. The compliance definition for that spend aspect is in relation to our transparency obligations. So have we got a corresponding contract entry up on the system? The wider compliance, which we cover more in section 2 of the report, is actually has the contract, whether it's transparently there or not, has it been lawfully entered into? Has it been entered into in accordance with our own rules? Has it been entered into in accordance with the wider procurement regulations?
In a sense, that's what I thought it meant. Is there a contract? Can we trace it? But, in adult services, there's £9 million where it's non-compliant.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily non-compliant in terms of that we don't have a contract in place. It's just that we haven't got the entry on the intend system where we don't have those spend controls there. So what we'll be doing is working with adult social care finance, really starting to do that, to look at those spend entries, track back and see actually, okay, which ones fall above the thresholds, get the contract entries up on the system. In doing that, we can also check at the same time if we've got the relevant governance paperwork in place, or if actually that there is a requirement to bring that into compliance, maybe enter into a waiver whilst we correct a situation.
Okay, yeah, I think I need to maybe sit down with somebody and have a little chat about this, because there's obviously things I don't really quite understand in relation to this, but it's just, yeah, concerning. It seems to me that we're not able, I mean, I know with a big organisation, tracking money is a challenge, but given the local authorities, you know, we've got a real responsibility to make sure that we don't lose track of money and spend it properly. I'm a bit concerned about some of the figures.
Understood.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Recommendation to you, Councillor Heaney, don't read Richard's report late at night. Okay. It's the first report I read, actually. No? Okay, Richard, thank you very much for that. For that bit, we've agreed to move into exempt session, so we need to turn everything off, don't we, James?
Yes, Chair. It might be prudent just to ask if there are any questions on the exempt papers to see if it's necessary to do so. But if so, if you could then formally ask the committee whether it wishes to pass that resolution to enter into exempt session, I shall then cease the broadcast.
We have this all the time. Nobody disagreed with it, so I'm assuming they agreed with it. But have you got any? I have no questions, I have to say, on the exempt report. Any members? Well, we haven't any, so we don't move in. Okay, right. Members and officers, thank you very much for your attendance here today. Very worthwhile. I enjoyed today's meeting, I have to say, and getting different reports for a change in different people. Thank you for that. And we'll see some of you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.